Hey everybody, happy Thursday. Now today's question actually comes from Patreon, and if you don't know what Patreon is, it's a way for you to support creators that you love so that we can continue doing that thing that you love. And so therefore, every one of my videos is brought to you by my Patreon patrons. And if you want more information about it, I'll link it in the description. You can check out the rewards and how it works, but let's just get into it. And the question is, hey Katie, I guess I'm just wondering if having a chronic illness trigger an eating disorder or eating disorder behaviors is a common thing to have happen. Good question. And why you think doctors are more than willing to give you the good, bad, and ugly and depressing symptoms of a chronic illness, or in my case, a few, and don't mention how it can affect a person mentally, let alone mention the possibility for an eating disorder to start. I saw 3 specialists, a physical therapist, as well as my PCP over the course of my 5 years with my chronic illness for answers, and not a single one of them acknowledged that it could be connected until I met and started seeing Janine, my therapist. Yay! And I really just wanted to address this situation, this topic as a whole. How and why can eating disorders be linked to chronic illness? Now, the first thing I want to address is her question about why do medical professionals like our doctors, our PCPs, people that we see, why don't they mention that there could be a connection between an eating disorder and chronic illness, or one could start because of the other? Why don't they mention that? Or how it can affect someone mentally. And overall, I feel that medical professionals don't spend enough time in their psych rotation. If you don't know, and I'm sure every state and every situation is a little bit different, but every physician has to spend a certain portion of time in a rotation in the psych ward. That doesn't mean that they sit down clinically like I do with people and hear how things feel and what people go through. They go to a psych ward in a hospital and spend a rotation in some kind of facility like that. And I just don't think that's sufficient. Also, I don't think that medical professionals are often taught enough about bedside manner and how to talk to someone else about all that they could be going through. They often just rattle off all the symptoms and what's going on and what they're gonna do and then wanna get to it, which is great if they're a surgeon or if they're a doctor and we're in an emergency situation. But when it comes to chronic illness and we see these people often the most, it would be really, really helpful if they could in some way help with their training so they know to talk about mental health and wellness and how it's healthy mind, healthy body, it's all connected, am I right? And overall, I think because they focus so much on the physical, they're reading through a chart, they're going through your list of your papers and all the symptoms and things you've had and medications you're on. They're so focused on that, I think they lose sight of how you might feel about it. And I wish something that one of my hopes in the future is to change the way they're trained so that when they offer up all of this stuff, they then also say, hey, I know this can be hard. Here are some referrals for therapists in the area, or here's a therapist that works in the hospital if you'd like to see him or her. That would be awesome. But unfortunately, that's just not the protocol at this time. Let's answer the overall question. That is, why do eating disorders and chronic illness go together? And is this a common thing? And the truth obviously is yes, it's a very common thing. And I wrote some notes about why I think eating disorders and chronic illness go together because I hear this all the time. And the number one thing that I thought of is a sense of control. When we are diagnosed with a chronic illness, we're told that this is something we're gonna have to live with for the rest of our lives, something that is completely out of our control. Nothing we can do can magically make it go away. Yes, we can take our medication and deal with the symptoms and manage it as best we can, but often people report feeling a loss of a sense of control, and this can help us get it back. The second reason I believe these go together is because when we have a chronic illness, things can just feel overwhelming. We might already feel so much discomfort that an eating disorder can give us a way to numb out. And I know that a lot of people talk about eating disorders only being about control, like that first reason I gave, but the second and I find this to be the most common is just not wanting to think about anything. I feel so overwhelmed. I just want to completely numb out. And if I'm focused on food, whether it's getting food, eating food, not eating food, doing certain things, whatever that is, the eating disorder allows us to do that and focus our thoughts solely on that so we can't think about any of the other shit going on. The third reason I feel that chronic illness and eating disorders go together is because medications, unfortunately, can really mess with our hunger and fullness cues. And I often find this to be the trigger for a lot of my clients when it comes to the eating disorder starting, because their medication made them so nauseous, they were throwing up all the time. And then when they weren't throwing up, when they got the medication right, they found that was kind of a way to cope. And so medications can make it hard for us to get back in touch with our body, and the illness as a whole can make it hard to get back in touch with our body, know when it's hungry and when it's full, and to be able to listen to those cues. The fourth reason I believe eating disorders and chronic illness go together is because we can be suffering from a lot of other things. We can be going through a loss, right? I did that interview with Hank Green. I'll link to the video we did together in the description, but he talked about grieving the loss of what his life could be and what he'd planned on it being. And so how hard that was, and that can lead to depression. And a lot of people struggle with that. And so eating disorders, like are another way to cope with bigger things going on. And so we use the eating disorder to deal with that grief and loss and depression and all that's come up for us as we've received the diagnosis and are living with a chronic illness. And the fifth and final reason that I believe chronic illness and eating disorders go together is trauma. And I know this sounds very similar because the eating disorder is just another way to cope, but I think it's important for us to acknowledge how traumatic it can be to be diagnosed with a chronic illness. Not only is the diagnosis itself traumatizing, hard to digest, there's a lot of grief and loss, like I talked about before, that come along with it. But secondly, it can put us in a vulnerable position. And a lot of people take advantage, and it can be really traumatizing. We can have family members abuse us when they're supposed to be taking care of us. There can be so many things. There's a lot to unpack when it comes to this, but I really just want to acknowledge that when we have a disability, a chronic illness, something that can make us vulnerable to others, I find that that's often so closely linked to trauma. And again, an eating disorder is a coping skill that helps us better deal and numb out from that whole experience and all of the PTSD symptoms we may be going through. Lastly, my advice to any of you who are finding this correlation, who feel that your chronic illness has triggered your eating disorder, please speak up, please reach out, please shout to be heard. I know medical professionals, like we talked about, might not be the best, but sometimes if we keep asking, we keep telling them, this is what's going on, this is how I feel, sooner or later someone's gonna hear us and will get us the help that we so desperately need and deserve. Know that nothing's wrong with you. This isn't completely odd, right? I said it's actually very common. So speak up, reach out, because truly only we can be our best advocate. I want to thank you all so much. If you are new to my channel, click here to subscribe and make sure you check out my Patreon page. Like I said, every video is brought to you by my wonderful and amazing Patreon patrons. And I will see you next time. Bye!